Hey folks, we got this great question from Ray Camden today. And what Ray wants to know is how do we take a page that would typically respond with HTML, and if an agent is requesting that page, that we then just send the raw markdown instead? And now we should be able to achieve this with a single prompt. But what I really wanted to do was to take a minute to explain how these pieces fit together so that as you would craft a prompt that would help you solve a problem like this, that you could explain using the right language and help your agent be successful. And as a matter of fact, we happen to follow this exact pattern on our Netlify documentation site. So if you go to any one of our docs pages, you'll notice we have this drop-down menu up here where you can copy the markdown, and that will copy the entire content of the page here as markdown text. But you can also view as plain text, and it takes you to just a plain text version of the markdown of this particular page. Now, different agents access content on the web in different ways. And one of the ways to handle this is by sending a specific accept header request. And I can show you what I mean. So if I go back to this page, I'm going to copy this URL. And let me go to my terminal. And if I just say curl and then I give it that URL, I'm going to get a bunch of HTML. This is the typical response when you go to this page in your browser. But what I can do on Netlify's website is I can pass a header, the accept header, and I can ask for plain text and then paste that same URL. And here I get just markdown text content. So this is essentially what we want to do. And this is what we're doing on our Netlify documentation site. So I wanted to kind of mimic that behavior in a essentially minimal reproduction site. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so here's a really simple documentation site. I can click get started. I can click view as markdown. And we see we've got the markdown content here, but then let's try to see if we can get the same behavior here. So let me copy that. And back in my console, curl, and we get the HTML, or curl with the header. And let's replace our URL here. And we get the plain text. Okay, so how does this work? Let's pull up the code. Okay, so we have our source content file here, which is how most of us are maintaining content and documentation sites, where we prefer to just write in markdown files and then have some sort of templating engine that parses and renders those markdown files. And that's what we have here. So this is a simple Astro site. And here's the Astro template that will load in the collection of those markdown files and then render it as HTML. But we also then have this other page, which we can see here is pages/source content/docs. And then it's slug.md.ts because we want the .md to actually show up in the URL. And this is doing something very similar, but it's just getting that raw content and not actually rendering the markdown file. So it's two different ways to display the same information. And all we've really done is nest the plain text version under this source content URL path. So this makes it really easy to link from your HTML version to your plain text version. But where the magic really happens, and we build this dynamically, is in an edge function. And so I have this function here, Netlify/edge functions, and we just called it content negotiation. And then if we look in our Netlify configuration file, we'll see that we are running that edge function on every single request. And what we do here is we say if the request starts with /source content, which is that plain, that's where we have we want to send the raw plain text anyway. So if the path starts with that, then we just don't do anything. We just say, cool, send what you were going to send anyways. Otherwise, we're going to go through that process of that content negotiation. And we're going to look, essentially what we're doing here is we're looking to see, do we have that accept header? And is that accept header either text plain or text markdown? And if it is, then we're going to go grab we just have the logic here where we go and fetch that raw content and we return that content directly to the user instead. And that's how we can have the same exact URL return two very different versions of the page so that Human users can access this through a browser. They see they get the HTML content, they get the nice markup and the great visual experience. But an agent can use that accept header, and then they get just the text content. They don't have to parse it beyond the content that is actually meaningful. So now you have that information. It should help you craft that into a prompt where you can give your agent these different pieces to put together and bring that experience into essentially any website, any framework deployed on Netlify, and that should work just great for you. I hope that helps. See you all next time.